I've been reading Jacqueline Wilson since I was about 7 or 8 years old. I'm now 30, so it's been quite a journey, and I vow to always read everything she's written. I will forever keep up with her work because I owe her that much. I wouldn't be a writer today were it not for her stories. And it occurred to me that I was a little bit behind as I hadn't read Project Fairy yet. This came out in September of last year, 2022. And this is actually the first time I've read Jacqueline Wilson as an ebook, which was quite an interesting experience and also a bit of a shame because the smell of the books take me straight back to my childhood. I don't know if it's just psychological and just me thinking it, but there's something about the smell of Jacqueline Wilson books that seem to smell different to any other books. Nevertheless, I actually really enjoyed reading it in ebook format. And the narrative, I wasn't sure what I'd think of it because although I vow to keep up with all of her books, I am aware that some of the narratives are definitely for younger readers and they may not appeal to me that much. And I also don't really like her historical novels as much as I do her contemporary ones because of an element of relatability. I love her books where I feel like she's really speaking to the child of today and she's referencing pop culture things and stores that children go into, things that really make them relatable. And when I saw the title of this one, Project Fairy, and I read the description and it sounded like there was a magical element, I thought, is this going to have that relatable element? It does. And honestly, I adored this story. It is so sweet, it is inspiring, a little unrealistic at parts. I'm not just talking about the fairy aspect. And also, I feel like, well, actually, I'll come back to the ending. I'll discuss the ending at the end with a spoiler warning. But this is about a young girl called Mab, who is named after Queen Mab, the fairy queen. And straight away, we have a little bit of education there. I don't know about most other children, but certainly when I was the target audience age for this, I wouldn't have been aware of who Queen Mab was. And she's named after Mab because her mother is obsessed with fairies. And she buys her a fairy dress for Mab's birthday. But Mab is much more of a tomboy, almost gothic, and isn't exactly your traditional fairy-loving girly girl. But she pretends to be grateful for this dress, and she doesn't let her younger brother Robin, also named after a fairy, know that she doesn't like it either. And while at school, her teacher gives her a book about fairies, this Victorian book with these almost grotesque images of fairies, not your sweet, sparkly, twinkly fairies, but the much more, maybe I don't want to say macabre, maybe that's too extreme, but definitely a lot more realistic, if you like. And there's a pressed flower in this book. And she puts this pressed flower in a jar of water overnight, thinking it will plump it up. And when she wakes up, this flower is actually a fairy. And what happens there is her interacting with this fairy. This fairy's called Bindweed. And trying to find out what the fairy needs and make the fairy find its home. Bindweed I love as a character. I didn't like her to begin with because she rubbed me off the wrong way a little bit. She wasn't very pleasant, but that's kind of the point. She's meant to be an atypical fairy. She's not just all sweetness and sparkles. She's got an attitude. She is literally heartless. We learn that she doesn't have a heart. Fairies have sap running through their veins instead of blood. It's very creative and very beautifully imagined, and the detail is brilliant. I could really imagine Bindweed. Of course, there are some illustrations throughout, illustrated by Rachel Dean. When I first heard that Nick Surratt was no longer going to be illustrating Jacqueline Wilson's books, my heart fell in my chest. But honestly, Rachel Dean has some beautiful, beautiful designs, and it's beautifully illustrated. And there are illustrations throughout as well, and not just at the start of each chapter. There are sometimes breaking up the sections a little bit. And I really kind of imagined Bindweed and could picture her and visualize her, and I think the description in this is gorgeous. And it's all about Mab trying to work out what to do with this fairy, and it's a beautiful story, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. The only downside is how it ended. The rest of it I thought was actually quite surprising, and something happened at the museum. I genuinely wasn't expecting that. And it was a really emotional couple of chapters and a real turning point. And I thought it was timely placed and very well written. I can't say too much more than that without spoiling it. But I guess a spoiler from now, I'm not actually going to explain what happens at the end. I will explain what doesn't happen. And what doesn't happen is the tying together of threads. There are so many loose ends. There are so many things that I wanted to know about. What happened with the spider? I'll not say any more about that. What happened with her enemy? Was there any more said on that? I think we needed more information. We needed an epilogue of sorts at the very least. And I just felt like I'd been left hanging a little bit. Like there were all of these things that I was looking forward to finding out and seeing how they unraveled. What happened with her former best friend? What became of that? There were so many questions left unanswered that I feel like they just lobbed off a chapter. And I feel like they'd just forgotten to include the ending. Like the proper ending was great, but there's an epilogue. There needs to be something there to round it off. And I just feel like they forgot to include it in the ebook. Now, I don't actually think that. I don't think it ever existed. But that's what it feels like. So I kind of left it feeling a bit empty. I thoroughly enjoyed it and really enjoyed the journey. But at the end, I kind of thought, where's the rest? So that was a bit of a downside. But that aside, I thought Project Fairy was a beautiful read, magical even to my 30-year-old brain. On paper, it wouldn't have sounded like something I would have loved, but actually the execution is beautiful. Jacqueline Wilson is still completely at the top of her game, and if you haven't read Project Fairy and you're a fan of Jacqueline Wilson's books, I'm pretty confident that you'll enjoy it.